Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. Today for me, it's the Ides of March, March 15th, 2013, the day that Caesar was murdered by people who supported the Republic. And as a not very loyal Republican today, I support what their move, Cassius and Brutus. They lost. Augustus Caesar won, and he founded the empire, and it was all history from there. Meanwhile, today is 2013, and the Roman Empire is long gone, as well as the Roman Republic. However, it's still the Ides of March on 2013. Because it's March 15th, for me, it's not March 15th for you. You're going to be watching this probably next week, the week after, or any time in the next month. And as a result, anything I talk about is going to be so obsolete, it'll be almost ridiculous. Because I am coming to you deep in the past. The Catholic Church just selected Franciscus I as the new Pope. He was Cardinal Bergoglio. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Former Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I will show over my right shoulder Argentina, and Buenos Aires right about there. Right about there. And he was actually head of the Jesuit order, or the Order of Jesus, which is its real name, for many years. Ironically, he declared himself Pope Francis, or Franciscus. What is the irony? The irony is that the Order of Jesus, the Jesuits, founded by Spaniard during the Counter-Revolution, and very, very involved with the Inquisition and all this other stuff, was replaced as far as the missions were concerned in Arizona and California by the Franciscans. And the Franciscans were the rivals to the Jesuits historically. The Franciscans being more loyal to the Bourbon dynasty than the Habsburgs. That's part of it, but also being supposedly a more gentle, loving Christian group than the Jesuits, who were the martyrs and the warriors of Christ during the 30 Years' War, the Spanish Inquisition, and the Spanish Empire. So, irony of irony, the former head of the Jesuit order declares himself Franciscus I. St. Francis of Assisi, let's see if I can find Europe on here. And there's Italy, and Assisi somewhere in the northern middle. He was the gentle saint, the patron saint of animals and gentleness and wonderfulness and all this other stuff, and actually opposed the aggressive, intolerant church of his day. What was his day? In the 1200s, the militant church that controlled the earth and of Innocent and people like that, who basically claimed that the Pope was supreme throughout Christendom and the real leader, and secular as well as religious, of the entire world. So interesting progression. I don't know much about Bergoglio. Apparently, he was called the Archbishop of the slums in Buenos Aires, and visited the poorer areas and supported helping the poor. Anybody who's ever read the actual first our New Testament, which I have a number of times, the words of Jesus are always clothe and feed the poor, cure the sick, support the elderly, and the meek shall inherit the earth. And basically put down the wealthy. A rich man It's as difficult for a rich man to get into heaven as for a camel to get through the eye of a needle. Apparently, in order to keep animals out of certain parts of ancient cities, the eye of a needle was actually big enough for a man to fit through, but not an animal. So I guess that's the first pedestrian zones in history. So that's apparently what was talked about. But when you think about a rich man trying to squeeze through the eye of an actual needle, very, very tiny, it's unlikely that somebody who's driven by greed and avarice and lower taxes and not helping anybody is likely to get into heaven according to the words of the founder of the Christian religion. And of course, that's the founder of the Orthodox religion, the founder of the Roman Catholic religion, and the founder of the Protestant religion. So the Christian right, or whatever we want to call it, has strayed a lot. Ayn Rand apparently was not a follower of at least the words of Jesus of Nazareth. And it'll be interesting to see the difference between a very, very socially conservative German Pope, who was also a theologian of the anti-abortion, anti-contraception, and so on and so forth, with a pope that origins from Argentina, Latin America. First of all, Argentina, of course, have had their ups and downs politically between arch-conservative, almost fascist generals during the the dirty war of 1976, I believe, to 83, when generals took over Argentina, and the more Peronist or socialist or civic radicalist, it's hard to say what they really support, progressivist segments of the secular politics of Argentina. Meanwhile, here's this guy who may or may not have actively opposed the generals during the Falkland War and the Dirty War in Argentina. He is now the Pope. And I'm not going to get into a lot about the church, but the church has to clean up the scandals on pedophile priests, who were not so much that the priests had gotten up the ladder that far, but that they were either retired in place or actually put into new parishes, and that their crimes were covered up and protected by archbishops. And of course, that whole situation is causing a lot of trouble for the church, especially in LA and Boston and New York, where they've been losing lawsuits and reducing income by millions and millions of dollars. And a lot of the Western Europeans are kind of secularists, even the Catholics. And the American Catholics, while more devout, also have a substantial, and I wouldn't say total, loss of faith, and that is going to have to be addressed by the new Pope. Meanwhile, a big segment of the Catholic vote has gone Republican, which is basically set on reducing Medicaid, which of course is caring for the sick, reducing food stamps, which is feeding the poor. All of these programs, reducing, basically voucherizing Medicare, putting, ironically, the seniors on Obamacare and everybody else off of Obamacare, which is, of course, taking care of the elderly. Those are all things that were actually mandated, by the founder of that particular church. So it'll be interesting to see the effect of a new pope, a pope from a completely different political culture and culture, as to whether all of this kind of Ayn Randist philosophy that's followed by the Tea Party and other people, but have been embraced by the white ethnics in America, many of whom were Catholic, some of whom were on the Biden side, some of whom were on the Ryan side. Whether they're both right-wing or left-wing, but a lot of them have become very conservative and very right-wing in the American sense, where they've embraced only the message of anti-gay and anti-abortion on the Catholic side, but they haven't embraced the message of feed the poor, sacrifice to feed the poor, sacrifice to support the elderly, sacrifice to your own self and your own goods and whatever. And in this case, it's taxes or taking fortunes and giving it to the church, because the church basically was the medical establishment in previous decades in the United States. There never was a period when the medical industry was controlled or by private industry, by free enterprise. Free enterprise was never part of it. There were a few country doctors, and they were usually poor and helped the poor. But mostly the hospitals, the mental hospitals and the workhouses were supported by the state, and the regular hospitals were controlled and paid for by the churches, because the churches were ordered by their founder to take care of the sick, and to feed and clothe the poor, and to support the elderly. So it'll be very, very interesting to have this new pope, who may or may not actually make the statement that and restate what is actually in the New Testament and the words of the founder of the Christian faith, and that dissonance between the Republican agenda and the positions of the founder of the Christian faith, who'd probably be called a lily-livered open-hearted liberal today, whether that dissonance is going to be there. There was this, emphasis on purity and sinlessness on one hand, but also on actual sacrifice and personal sacrifice to support the poor, support the elderly, feed and clothe the poor, and heal the sick. And here in our country, pretty much the state has taken that over, but nobody is saying that the Catholic Church has the resources, or all the churches together have the resources to take over these for-profit hospitals that just want more and more and more, and that are so insistent on mass transfer, including the pharmaceutical industry, from the pockets of the taxpayer directly into the pockets of their leaders and their CEOs and so on and so forth, where we have the governor of Florida, the venal Mr. Scott, who was actually head of Hospital Corporations of America when they were stealing $2 billion from Medicare, from our elderly, from the pockets of the taxpayers, of which he personally benefited $500 million, became a $500 million and used that money to run for governor of Florida. There you are. There you have it. That's the juxtaposition. And of course, the Republicans like to look back to this golden age when the healthcare industry was private. Now, it's being beset by Medicare and Medicaid and government programs left and right, when in fact the healthcare of the United States was never controlled by private industry. It was always nonprofit, and for the most part, it was controlled by various Christian churches and a few Cedar Sinai, some Jewish charities as well, but basically controlled by religions on the basis of healing the sick and supporting the poor and elderly. So it will be interesting to see what is this Pope going to come out with. Now, I will say another good thing about the new Pope Franciscus. He did come right out his second statement and say that he supports Vatican II. And basically that he's against anti-Semitism and supports Catholic Jewish friendship, which is a good thing. He was apparently very supportive of the Jewish community that lived in Buenos Aires, and there was a very big Jewish community there, many of whom live in Israel today. So that's pretty much what I have to say about the new Pope. I wish him well. He sounds like a pretty good guy. I am not Catholic myself, so I really shouldn't interject. However, it will be interesting whether he is going to be consistent with his positions when he was in Latin America and the impact on Catholics within the United States, where we had a pope before. Now he supports anti-abortion and so on and so forth, but that was the focus of the previous pope. That was the center of his message, whereas the center of at least Cardinal Bergoglio's message within Argentina has been, what are we doing about the poor? And of course, the poor in Latin America are a festering problem, and there's a lot of them, and they need a lot of help and support. So it's a much, I won't say it's a bigger issue, because one of the reasons we don't have, we do have some, at least ghettos and slums, we don't have outright starvation, is because of food stamps and WIC, and which is supports pregnant women and keeps them from, and it keeps them, provides them nutrition. And food stamps and children's lunches and all these other things, all these other support programs, which are basically provided by the state, ironically. And of course, that was the push at the time to fulfill certain statements by the founder of the Christian churches, which has a tremendous influence on the history of the United States. The war on poverty, the idea that nobody in America should starve, nobody in America should not have enough food. One of the problems we have, and I'm not going to minimize poverty, and poverty is terrible in America, but one of the problems we have in America is obesity in the poor areas, because the food that is available is fattening and not very nutritious, and the good markets don't really serve these areas of our country. However, food stamps are there, and school lunches are there, and a lot of children are being fed who would otherwise have what they call nutritional uncertainty, but we call it hunger. We call it going to bed hungry with a burbling stomach and a complete inability to be able to learn the next day without a nutritious breakfast and a nutritious lunch. So let's hope that this continues, at least in America. And I'm going to get into a little bit about the politics. Basically, since the last show, a new pope has been selected in the Catholic Church. Pretty important thing, 1.2 billion followers, the largest individual organization in the world with the most members. The entire Islamic religion is about 1 billion people, but the 1 billion people under the control of Islam, many different governments, and a decentralized system of mosque governance, basically not under the control of one person. However, the Chinese government has 1.2 billion people, about the same size. I guess you could say is an equal size organization, probably more powerful. So what happened since the last time I've spoken, since the February show? Well, the biggest thing is that they jumped the sequester cliff. Basically, the Republicans didn't want to raise taxes again in any way. They didn't want to close loopholes. So they bluffed themselves into jumping over the cliff and supporting the sequester. Sequester, as I said last month, was agreed to if in 2011, when they had a terrible situation where they were not going to raise the debt ceiling and put our entire economic system at risk. In return, they agreed that there would be this sequester. However, both sides would join together in a bipartisan commission. Bipartisan commission would cut $2 to $4 trillion from 10 years' budgets, eventually reduce the deficit, and as a result, this sequester would never happen. The sequester was supposed to happen during the fiscal cliff on December 31st, 2012, and they pushed it down the road for 2 more months. And on the last day of February, the first day of March, they couldn't come to an agreement, and the Republicans didn't try because they were basically bluffed into a situation where they agreed to an increase in tax rates, what their whole being, their whole philosophy is against, in order to avoid the fiscal cliff, so that they jumped over the sequester. Now, what's in the sequester? Well, what is in the sequester is more than half of the cuts of an $85 billion cut across the board is against defense. And then on top of it, the rest is against only discretionary and only some discretionary spending on the other side. So the result was a 13% reduction between March and the end of the year in defense spending, and an 8% reduction between March and the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th, in discretionary regular spending, which includes the Border Patrol and FAA and health inspections and meat inspections and all the other things that the government does. So the Republicans are happy that the domestic discretionary spending has been cut. But what didn't get cut? What didn't get cut was Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, veterans, and defense, at least personnel spending, the spending on the paychecks of our soldiers and our people overseas. So basically, because these are cuts on every single program, programs are going to be stretched, programs are not going to produce as much, and the government oversight people, all of the million defense federal employees are going to have 14 to 17 days of furloughs, unpaid furloughs, and they're probably never going to get paid for them. So you're going to have a situation where the guy who inspects the ammunition that's going to the soldiers overseas, he's going to be off. He's going to be running a 4-day week. The people that write the contracts are going to write them slowly, and they're going to produce them slowly. So the goods are not going to get to the soldiers as rapidly, because they're going to have a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week. And this is all going to happen. Plus, this is going to happen for the FAA, the air traffic controllers, the meat inspectors, and all these people. So basically, we were able to jump over the sequester cliff without much of an impact. But the impact is going to start up. Meanwhile, the next Republican budget, because they were embarrassed during the Romney campaign, that the proposed budget was never going to balance. So now he's going to balance it by 2023 in 10 years, but he's capped defense. So the Republican Party, the party that was always for low taxes on one end, but for a strong defense on the other, has now sacrificed the never raising rates on taxes or never having a tax increase, because they did that at the fiscal cliff. And now they've sacrificed their position as being the party that's strong in defense, because now they're the party that's weak on defense. Basically, under the Ryan budget, not only has there been a big cut this year, but under the Ryan budget, all those sequester cuts are going to stay. They're going to be offset, but there's going to be a cap on defense spending. Thank you very much. My name is Reed Silverne.